Today I fucked up, most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to me. So, a few years ago me and this girl I'd been seeing for a short while and I are out on our first official date. We'd been seeing each other for a while but always with other friends etc, and nothing was official between us. TBH, she was way out of my league, so didn't think I had much of a chance of anything long-term materializing. It was a complicated all physical, but hardly any ice broken otherwise kind of deal. And I wasn't the most confident type anyway when it came to relationships and stuff. I was amazed I actually had the balls to ask her out in the first place. Anyway, we're about to go see a movie, and I'm getting dressed up, and as I try on my brand new pair of jeans that I ordered online, slightly too big for me, not drowning me but just looked a bit crap, and I had to pull them up at the waist slightly every 10 or 15 steps. No other clean jeans in the house, my belt buckle had broken a few days before, I was kind of screwed, but no way was I passing up this date. It was our first proper one, had to roll with it and just wear them. They weren't that bad, just frustrating. Anyway, after I pick her up we're en route to the cinema, and right next to the cinema there's a load of clothes shops. We're a bit early anyway, so I decide to go nip into a few of the stores quickly. I knew I was desperately in need of a belt as I was getting a bit self-conscious about having to constantly pull up my trousers, fighting for small talk whilst I joke about my old belt falling apart. My date mentions I should buy a real leather one and not a PVC one as they last longer. I figured I might as well get a good one as my old cheap one at home broke anyway. So, we go into a clothes store. I'm there trying to find a new belt, but I can't find a proper leather one anywhere. After a while she spots the women's shoes display and says to me, going to look at the shoes, be back in a minute. I carry on and finally I find a belt that, TBH, looks like it's almost too shiny to be real leather, but it said it was real on the ticket and seemed sturdy enough, so I grab it, and after spending another few minutes of browsing random other stuff I go to find her. I do a lap of the store carrying this belt and suddenly remember, oh yeah, she was looking at shoes or something, I'll go there then. Got to the shoes display and oh, she's stood there in front of me, head up, looking at the shelf of expensive stuff. So I decide to play a stupid little joke on her as we're fairly playful and stuff, and I go behind her and tap her ass with this belt and then hug her from behind with my head on her shoulder, and I say leather or PVC? Whilst holding the belt in front of her. She turns around and, yep, wasn't her. Was just someone who had the same hairstyle wearing an identical black cardigan, harmlessly looking at shoes, and a random guy has just come behind her, lightly tapped her ass with a belt, put his head on her shoulder whilst hugging her from behind. She freezes, and to top it all off he seemingly dropped the casual pickup line of leather or PVC? As if it was a weirdo fetish proposition, and when she turns around to see me, I'm stood there with my trousers looking like they're about to fall down. Turned out in the end my date was in the changing rooms trying on a top that she had found. I instantly realized what happened and immediately died inside. The cringe memories of it still haunts me to this day and often pops into my head just as I'm about to fall asleep. Luckily the poor lady laughed her head off whilst I was stuttering out an explanation where every other sentence was "I'm so sorry." Couple of bystanders also in fits of laughter, and one guy even dropped his coffee, he was laughing that hard. Eventually I start laughing too, all whilst dying inside. My date gets out the changing room and she starts laughing uncontrollably after I explain. So embarrassed. Now I definitely didn't have a proper shot at a relationship with my date and I'd screwed it all up. I recoiled into myself and wanted the world to swallow me up. Afterwards, whilst dropping my date back home, not expecting anything to materialize as I was a laughing stock and my self-confidence was in the drain. My date tells me that she's had a wonderful time and never laughed that hard in her life. From her saying that, I suddenly get a YOLO attitude out of nowhere and get the confidence to ask her out on another proper date. Fast forward to today and we're married with a brand new baby. Kind of turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Too long didn't read. Hugged a random from behind when out shopping whilst on a date, thinking that the random was my date. Cringe. Dude, I just got nervous reading this. Jesus. Forgot to add, The guy who laughed so hard that he dropped his coffee was the poor lady's husband, and when he went to get a staff member to tell them he spilt it all over the floor, he explained why he was laughing so hard, and the girl that came with a mop and bucket even cracked up laughing at me. And remember, I couldn't go anywhere, had to eventually buy the belt, had to wait for my date to get out of the changing room, everyone laughing at me. Utterly painful, embarrassed smiley face. Did a similar thing to a woman I thought was my wife but wasn't. We were touring an old frontier fort in the Midwest. We were in what had been the general store and I was looking around up at the high shelves. Unbeknownst to me, my wife wandered off while I was looking around. Saw what turned out to be a different woman about the same size, hair color, and jacket color as my wife out of the corner of my eye. So while I was still staring upward, I reached out and gave her a little affectionate squeeze on the arm. She did not feel familiar. She turned to stare daggers at me and I was instantly mortified. It was so embarrassing. I fell over myself apologizing, but man, she was mad. My wife was looking at me like I had three heads and her expression alternated between laughter and embarrassment. That was a long time ago, and it still makes me cringe. Shit. This happened to me when I was like 6, because my dad brought me to work and was wearing a suit. And my eye level was around the pants level. Still embarrassed as hell. I love today I fucked up posts with majorly happy endings. Kind of anti-meta. Or such a happy ending. I was scared for you for a minute. Today I fucked up by using my dad's clippers to shave my junk. Obligatory. This didn't happen today. This happened about 10 years ago. So, when I was about 12 or 13, I discovered the magic that is porn and meeting with Rosie Palm and her 5 sisters. One day, I was sick and skipped out on going to school and had a day to myself at home. One thing I had noticed about porn at the time, I was about 14 at the time, was that all the guys were shaved down under. Of course, I decided that I needed to trim the bush as well. But, of course, being 14 and not having facial hair, I did not own my own razor. So I decide that I'll go to my parents' restroom and use one of theirs. My dad had a very nice pair of electric clippers at the time which he used for trimming his stash and shaving his face. Well, I decided, if it's good enough for his face, it'll be good enough for my balls. So I take it to my bathroom and get to work. At first, it works great, no problem at all. It's cleanly shaving the area above the shaft and I'm having no problems. I'm thinking to myself, hell yeah, this is perfect, when I decide it's time to work on the balls and shave them. This, my dear reader, is where I fucked up. Being I'd never shaved my balls before, I didn't realize that the skin should be taunt as to prevent and accidents. So I get to work, and it's going fine for a while. And then, the clippers snag the sack, and I've got a cut about ½ an inch long on the sack. I lose my goddamn mind, screaming bloody murder because I've just cut my sack and there's blood everywhere. It just won't stop bleeding, no matter how hard I try to stop it. Now, for many, this would be when someone same would have stopped shaving. But, I've got one bare ass nut and one still covered in a bush, so I decide to finish my gruesome work. And then, the same thing happens and I nick the sack again. So here I am freaking out with my balls bleeding from 2 places and my dad's poor clippers covered in blood. I struggle for like an hour to stop the bleeding before I finally get it to stop. Then, I clean my dad's clippers and place them back in his shaving gear. Now, while the bloody balls and pain were bad, the worst part for me was my poor dad. He never knew of this event and I will never tell him. He still uses that clipper to this day to trim his stash and shave. Now, every time I'm home and see him using it, all I can think about is the pain I caused myself and the fact that my ball shaver is used like 3 times a week on his face. But I can never tell him. I'm so sorry, Dad. Love you. TLDR, used my dad's clippers to shave my genitals, nicked my balls twice, and never told him the clippers he uses to this day have been dirtied by my shame. Manscaped for butt, balls and body. Too bad that wasn't around then. I fucking swear. Legendary stuff. Got it earlier this year. My life is changed. LOL rookie mistake. I think almost every guy that tried shaving pubes at a young age messed up. I told my stepdad afterwards and he said you need to do a half a jerk for that, you dummy. Best to use manual razor, works much better. Been there, done that. 010 would not recommend. I thought this was a rite of passage for all men. Today I fucked up by trying to cuddle my wife. Obligatory not today but 2 nights ago. So there I am at 3 AM. I wake up to my wife sleeping diagonally with her feet on her side of the bed, but her head on my pillow. This is a pretty common occurrence in our house and she simply has no boundaries once she's asleep. Since the tiny triangle of bed I have available to sleep on is shrinking, I decide to do the obvious thing and spoon her so I can maximize my square footage. 2 minutes later, as I begin to fade to sleep, my wife suddenly removes my hand from around her and begins kicking back with her heel in a stomping motion to force me off of her. After about 7 kicks she settles back into the cute little sleeping angel she appears to be, never actually waking up. Apparently her self-defense mid-sleep is on point and she was not having it. I proceed to push her back to her side of the bed, grumbling as my shin is screaming at me. She wakes up the next day full of smiles and sunshine with absolutely no memory of the night before. Too long didn't read, tried to cuddle my wife and ended up getting curb stomped. I keep a small air mattress next to my side of the bed specifically as a roll-off point for when the wife gets the middle of the night Jimmy legs. Haha, Jimmy legs. A prepared defensive sleeper is a living one, I suppose. This is actually a daily occurrence in my household. My wife and I are apparently both hostile sleepers. I have been told that when my husband shoves me back onto my own side, I giggle and cuddle him in response. I have no memory of this whatsoever. My husband just did this same thing. Apparently he was dreaming someone was coming after him with needles and he was punching them to get away. Ridiculousness of it was astounding. I feel ya, it's the other way in our house and husband sometimes punches in his sleep, but other times he will cuddle me and tell me how much he loves me, without waking up at all and with no memory in the morning. I've also been punched and slapped. Abusive narcoleptics all around.